Prime Minister Matteo Renzi, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
So here you are, several weeks into your crisis and 2 days into a nationwide lockdown. Can you tell me how that is affecting the country, and how do you even patrol and monitor a lockdown of this size?
It's a very strange experience, particularly for a people as Italian people, very used to shake an hand, to give a hug, kisses. Italian people is not a people able to block everything, but there is a priority today, and the priority is block the coronavirus, because maybe also we as Italian establishment, as Italian people, we made some mistakes, and we became, unfortunately, the first country in Europe for a number of contagious. So the idea is that after the last Sunday, everyone have to stay at home, with the possibility, of course, to buy the thing important for the life, for the drugs, for the food, of course. But a lot of shops are closed, and we believe for the next 2 weeks, more or less, to live in a very strange situation for the first time after World War II. But I think this is necessary, and, my opinion, that measures, very, very strong, will be the same measures in every country of Europe in the next days, because if you follow the graphics, the numbers of problem in Italy are exactly the same of the numbers of the problem in France and in Germany in the first days. So in the next days, if France and Germany will not able to block as in Italy, we'll have the same problem. So it's very strange, right. strange situation.
So I want to ask you, because you started by saying we made some mistakes, and I want to know from your perspective, because it is a lesson to the rest of the West right now, from your perspective, what are the mistakes? I can tell you that in January, your Prime Minister Conte, boasted, the system of prevention put into place by Italy is the most rigorous in Europe. Well, clearly that was not the case. So what happened? In your opinion, as a former Prime Minister, what are the mistakes that you made and that others can learn from?
I think if we discuss now about mistakes, is not for polemics, but only, as you said, only to learn from our mistakes. For example, we blocked the direct plane from China to Italy. And this is the same measure yesterday announced from Spain government for Italian plane. But that is not the good measure, because if you block the direct plane, but we don't check the people who came from the contagious area, who used the transition plane, if you don't care about that, you risk to income the people with the contagious. The real priority is not close the direct plane, but, for example, close the schools. I'm father of three children who in the scholar age, and I know how is it difficult to close the schools. But this decision will be a decision, my view, my 2 cents, really necessary. We need that decision in every part of Europe, and I'm very appreciated the decision of some leaders, also in the United States, who blocked in some cluster, in some districts, the schools. So not block the direct plane, but block the schools. Second mistake, I think if we decide to block some areas, we have to block really the areas. Okay, China is not a democracy. China have instruments very strong, maybe more efficient, but of course I prefer democracy than the efficiency. At the same time, we have to decide an democratic way to block the people, because I know it's not easy to force the people to stay in the single town and in the single places. But there is not alternative. This is a virus who is really a pandemic event. And the only way to block the virus today is avoid the contagious, and also human relation is very sad that, but it's the only way for a little period. My hope is American guys, Chinese guys, Israeli, European, Italian guys could find very quickly vaccination, and that is very interesting because in the public debate in Italy, for a lot of time, a lot of people, populists leader, used to say, we don't believe in vaccination. Now in Italy, there is not place for no vaccination.
The anti-vax movement,
Everyone
yes.
believe in the science.
Yes.
Yeah. Everyone today, fortunately, believe in the science.
Well, they definitely need to, but as you know,
very sad.
As you know, Prime Minister, there's unlikely to be a vaccination before a year or 18 months, but we'll see what happens. But just interestingly, as you said, your shops, there are bars, there are restaurants. The Pope did his regular sort of Wednesday mass behind closed doors. The Senate has banned any floor debates. You are a senator. So the blocking is happening, as you say. I want to ask you this, though. What about the massive death toll? And, well, I mean, it's the highest in Europe. And in the last 24 hours, close to 200 people died of this virus. And what we understand, apart from just blocking, there is a very severe shortage of hospital space, of doctors and nurses, not just in Italy, but around the world. And a doctor in Italy said, it's like war surgery here. This is a paramedic who was published in the Corriere della Sera from Bergamo in Lombardy, which is closed down. It's like war surgery. We only try to save the skin of those who can make it. That is what's going on. Do you worry that choices are having to be made about who's saved and who isn't, who's treated and who is not?
The decision of last Sunday will produce effect not quickly, but in 1 week, in 10 days. Because if you block the people today, the statistics about new contagions are statistics which depended from the last 2 weeks, 1 week, not from today. So, first point, this decision will show the effects in the next days, not today, not tomorrow, but in probably, according to scientist opinions, in 1 week, 10 days. This is the first. Second point, in Italy, that decision, very strong, is the only way to avoid the risk of collapse of hospitals, because the problem is not the level of mortality of coronavirus. The problem is too much people needs the hospitalization, and if that arrive all together in the hospitals, the risk is the organization, particularly as you know about the audio of Bergamo's doctor, the risk is in the organization of the system. My view is that if Italy will be able in the next week, 10 days, to support, to sustain, more correctly, to sustain that wave of contagions of the last week, the last 10 days, for Italy, from the strong decision of last Sunday, will start finally a new way, a positive new way.
Okay.
But the problem is we live in a global world. And for that, my request is please to my friends of the other European countries, and let me be very clear, also to American guys, please don't make the same mistakes of undervaluation of the risk. Because a lot of people, for example, decide also in France last week or in the UK or in Germany to go, for example, to theater or to museum, because the reaction is, don't be afraid, we go to theater. This is a good reaction when there is an attack of terrorists. We show our resilience. But when there is a virus, we have to avoid to stay in public places. So don't waste time. Italy waste time, and this was a mistake. Please, France, Germany, UK, Spain, we have to absolutely avoid the risk to waste time.
Okay, so let me play what Angela Merkel of Germany has said today. I mean, she's trying to calm people, but she's also said that pretty much more than half of her population could become infected. Listen to what she said.
It has to be understood that if the virus is here and there is not yet immunity of the population against this virus, no vaccine and no therapy, that then a high percentage of the population, experts say 60 to 70%, will be infected as long as this is the case. And that is why this intensive search for therapy and vaccine is ongoing.
So that's from Chancellor Merkel, who is not an alarmist, but 60 to 70% is a very high number. I wonder what you make of Europe's reaction to Italy. At first, there was a reluctance to sell or to send to Italy, protective gear or any kind of medical help, because everybody was trying to hoard their own help. Have things changed? Because Europe says they're now going to really help Italy.
First of all, Angela is a very pragmatic leader, and I agree with her. For sure, around the world, in the next months, half population, maybe, according to the data of scientists, will be affected from coronavirus. But the problem is the timeline, because if the people all together in the same period are infected, that will create a chaos in the hospitals. This is the reason to postpone the arrive of this infection, of this contagious. This is very important because, of course, coronavirus is not a tragedy for humanity in terms of lethality. But the problem is the timeline. This is the first. So reduce the risk of simultaneous contagious is very important. Second point, Europe is for sure ready to support and help Italy, but I repeat, in the next 10 days, in the next week, the problem today present in Italy will be present in Europe. So I think Europe have to do three things. First, we have to change the business model for the next 10 years. In the last 10 years, we follow the business model committed on Germany's leadership, particularly with the export of China in the car, in the industry of car, in the manufacturing. Good. This is the past, unfortunately, because China will reduce the import. And so for a new business model for Europe, we need more infrastructure, more flexibility, and less austerity. This is the first. About healthcare, I think we need a real European Union, for example, in the research, in the science. And the third, my view, we have to change the rules for the banks, because the problem today for the people who remains at home is the liquidity for money. Because if I'm an artisan, if I am an architect, a lawyer, and I'm forced to stay for 2 weeks, 3 weeks in my home, I have a problem of liquidity, of money. So European banks have to change the rules, particularly to encourage and to save the people to have liquidity to live in this period. And then when the crisis will be over, we will come back to normality.
So finally, Ursula von der Leyen, who is the EU Commissioner, has said today that the EU will distribute 25 billion euros across Europe, with several billion of those going to Italy. It's precisely, as you say, to help small and medium-sized enterprises, to help people stay at work, to try to cushion some of the worst economic effects of this. But I want to ask you this. You were Prime Minister during the Ebola crisis. How do you see the world reacting today in coronavirus compared to how they reacted in 2014 to when the Ebola crisis could have been a pandemic?
I remember in 2014 a great attention, unbelievable attention from President Obama about that. I remember in every meeting, President Obama and also Vice President Biden and other leaders, also Angela Merkel and other leaders around the world stressed the point of a global reaction. That is also my request to White House, to President Trump and to other leaders. Please, this is a pandemic event and we need a great effort from United States, exactly as in 2014, President Obama and the United States of America tried to do. For Europe, my view, I'm very optimistic as a character, but let me be very clear. I think 25 billion in these cases is absolutely not enough. Not enough because my personal view is Europe will make an initiative of 200 billion to stay in front of coronavirus, because today is only the first step. As Italian people, unfortunately, we are the place of stress test, because we are the place of the first real great event of coronavirus in Europe. But I'm really, really worried. In the next 10 days, that will be spread around Europe. And my request is we have to learn from the Italian mistakes.
All right. Former Prime Minister Matteo Renzi, thank you so much for joining me tonight.